Welcome back for another deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Today we're tackling a force that secretly shapes so much of our lives. Incentives, whether it's
Yeah.
choosing a coffee brand
Right.
or motivating an entire company.
Yeah,
Incentives are at play.
absolutely.
We've got this incredible report
Okay.
breaking down the science behind them,
The science.
how they work in real life,
Uh-huh.
and even some cautionary tales about what happens when they go wrong.
Yeah, when they go wrong.
It's interesting because,
The really intriguing part about incentives
yeah,
is how deeply ingrained they are
right.
in our everyday choices
Yeah.
without us even realizing it.
It's like this hidden code that we're all responding to.
Uh-huh.
So this report kicks off by defining what incentives actually are.
Okay.
It boils them down to three main types.
3 main types.
Monetary,
Non-monetary.
and emotional monetary. That's the obvious one, right?
Yeah.
Cold, hard cash.
Uh-huh.
Those big bonuses.
Right.
But how do those other types work?
Well, non-monetary incentives tap into things beyond just the paycheck.
Okay.
Think recognition,
Issue promotions.
even perks like flex hours.
Okay.
These address needs like personal growth or a better work-life balance.
So it's appealing to what we value beyond just money.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you have emotional incentives. These
Okay.
might sound a bit fluffy,
Okay.
but they're incredibly potent.
Yeah.
Think about things like public praise from your boss, an award for a project well done,
Uh-huh.
or even just sincere acknowledgement for going the extra mile.
That makes sense. It's like tapping into that need for validation and belonging.
Right.
But how does all of this actually work on us?
The report dives into something called the incentive theory of motivation.
Incentive theory of motivation.
This theory suggests our behaviors are largely driven by the desire to either gain rewards or avoid punishments.
Okay.
It's not just about chasing that paycheck.
Right.
It's about seeking approval, dodging criticism,
Dodging criticism.
even avoiding that feeling of loss.
Speaking of loss, the report highlights this concept called loss aversion
Loss aversion.
and how it plays a huge role in how we respond to incentives.
Okay.
I feel like this is something we all experience,
Yeah,
but might not consciously realize.
right. Loss aversion is fascinating. It basically means that the pain of losing something hits us much harder
Much harder.
than the joy of gaining something
Okay.
of equal value.
Of equal value.
Imagine losing a $100 bill
Okay.
versus finding one on the street.
Okay.
The sting of that loss would probably stick with you longer, right?
Oh, absolutely. Now, those clawback clauses,
Clawback clause.
companies put in bonus agreements make a lot more sense. They're essentially saying, we gave you this,
Right.
but we can take it back.
Take it back.
If you don't keep performing,
Right.
it plays right into that fear of losing something we already have.
Yeah.
Clever.
It's like a built-in insurance policy for the company,
Hmm.
but this idea goes even deeper.
Okay.
The report points out how incentives can actually shape our habits.
Shape our habits.
Think about it when you repeatedly reward a behavior.
Okay.
Let's say going to the gym daily.
Going to the gym daily.
Your brain starts linking that action to a positive feeling.
Linking it to that.
Uh-huh.
That makes sense. I've definitely experienced that with my workout routine.
Over time, it wires that action into your routine.
Wires it right in.
Even after the initial incentive, like a free personal training session,
Uh-huh.
is gone, the habit often sticks.
The habit sticks.
This connects to things like loyalty programs
Loyalty program.
and those frequent buyer rewards.
Frequent buyer rewards.
They get you hooked on the feeling of earning something.
Okay, so that explains why I can't resist those buy 10, get one free coffee punch cards.
Right.
The report also talks about social proof.
Social proof.
I'm curious, how does that play into all this?
Social proof.
Social proof.
This one's all about how our deep desire for acceptance and belonging
Uh-huh.
influences our actions.
Okay.
When you see others being rewarded for a specific behavior,
Okay.
it makes you more likely to do the same.
Yeah.
It's that classic, well, if everyone else is doing it,
Yeah.
it must be the right thing to do mentality.
So it's not just about making that one person feel good.
Right.
It's about subtly sending a message to everyone else.
Exactly.
Hey, this is the behavior we value around here.
Public recognition of someone's achievements
Yeah.
becomes this powerful nudge for everyone else.
Powerful nudge.
Think about those energy use reports
Okay.
that compare your household energy consumption to your neighbor's.
Okay. Yeah.
Suddenly, you're way more motivated to conserve energy
Uh-huh.
because no one wants to be that house on the block.
It's peer pressure, but in a good way.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered the types of incentives and how they tap into our psychology.
Uh-huh.
Let's get into how companies use this stuff in the real world.
In the real world,
The report gives some pretty incredible examples.
incredible examples.
Both successful
Successful.
and disastrous.
And disastrous.
Right.
And it really highlights how incentives, while incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
aren't always a guaranteed win.
One story that really grabbed my attention
Oh, yeah.
was about Hillcorp Energy.
Hillcorp Energy?
They promised their employees a massive $100,000 bonus
Wow.
if they could double the company's production by 2050.
And get this, they pulled it off.
They did.
That's a pretty bold move.
It is. That's a prime example of how a huge monetary incentive, especially when tied to a clear, ambitious goal, can drive incredible results.
It's like they tapped into this collective desire to win big.
Yeah.
And that massive reward kept everyone laser focused on the target.
Focused on that target.
But this report also talks about how companies like NetApp take a totally different approach.
Different approach.
They're all about small, frequent acts of recognition, right?
Exactly.
Small and frequent. Their executives make it a point to call employees daily.
Call them daily?
To praise them even for what might seem like minor achievement.
Minor achievements?
It's not about flashy bonuses. It's about fostering a culture of constant appreciation.
So it's less about the dollar amount.
Right.
And more about that consistent positive reinforcement.
And the report suggests that this approach has led to higher morale and engagement at NetApp.
Higher morale at NetApp.
It shows that non-monetary incentives, when done right, can be just as powerful as those big financial rewards. It's about making people feel genuinely valued.
That's a great point. But let's get into the darker side of this.
Oh.
The report also warns about what it calls perverse incentives.
Perverse incentives.
Situations where incentives backfire.
Backfire.
And lead to unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences.
This is where things get really interesting.
Interesting.
And a bit scary.
And a bit scary.
Oh, yes.
The dark side of incentives.
The dark side.
This is where good intentions
right?
Can pave the road to some pretty disastrous outcomes.
And the report uses this classic example.
A classic example.
Called the Cobra effect.
The Cobra effect.
To illustrate this point.
Have you heard of this one?
The Cobra effect is a perfect example of how well-intentioned plans can go hilariously wrong.
Hilariously wrong.
During British rule in India, there was a cobra problem in Delhi.
Cobra problem in Delhi.
So the British government offered a bounty for every dead cobra.
A bounty.
Brought to them, hoping to incentivize people to eliminate the snakes.
To eliminate the snakes.
Sounds logical enough, right?
Yeah, totally logical. But I have a feeling this didn't quite go as planned.
You guessed it.
Oh, no.
People, being the resourceful creatures they are, started breeding cobras.
Breeding cobra?
Specifically to collect the bounty.
What?
The cobra population actually increased.
Oh, my goodness.
Completely undermining the entire incentive.
So they accidentally created a cobra farming industry? A cobra farming industry.
That's incredible. And this isn't just some historical anecdote.
Right.
The report connects this to modern examples like the financial firm, whose aggressive sales quotas cure employees to create fraudulent accounts. Just to hit their targets.
Just to hit those targets.
It's a cautionary tale.
A cautionary tale.
About how a laser focus on one metric.
One metric.
In this case, sales number.
Sales number.
Can completely blind you to the bigger picture.
Completely blind you.
They were so fixated on hitting those quotas that they forgot about ethics and customer trust.
They forgot about ethics.
It really highlights how poorly designed incentives can have disastrous consequences.
Disastrous consequences.
Not just for individuals, but for entire organizations.
Entire organizations.
Absolutely.
And it brings us to the crucial question.
Okay.
How do you actually design incentives that work?
That work?
How do you harness their power without triggering those unintended consequences?
That's the million-dollar question. What does the report say?
The report breaks down 3 key principles.
3 key principles.
For crafting effective incentives.
For crafting effective incentives.
First, you need alignment with your core values.
Alignment.
The incentives you create should reflect what your organization truly cares about.
So if a company prides itself on exceptional customer service, they shouldn't create incentives that reward employees for rushing through calls. Even if it means closing more deals in the short term.
Precisely.
Closing more deals.
That would create a disconnect between their stated values and what they're actually incentivizing.
Okay.
The report gives an example of a call center that did just that, focused on speed over care.
Speed over care.
And ended up tanking their service quality.
Tanking the quality. That makes perfect sense.
Makes sense.
What's the second principle?
The second principle is the importance of balanced metrics.
Balanced metrics.
It's not enough to focus solely on quantity. Quality needs to be factored in as well.
I could see how that could easily go wrong.
Right.
If you incentivize people to just churn out more and more, they might cut corners or sacrifice quality to reach that target.
Exactly.
Cut corners, sacrifice quality.
The report shares a fascinating example about fossil collectors.
Fossil collectors.
Who were incentivized to collect more fossils.
More fossils.
Seemed like a good idea.
Seemed good on paper.
But it led to some collectors damaging specimens in their rush to gather more.
Damaging specimens.
They had to add a quality check into the incentive structure to solve the problem.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
Sweet spot.
Pushing for results while maintaining high standards.
High standards.
What's the final principle for designing effective incentives?
Your report stresses the importance of testing and feedback.
Testing and feedback.
It's crucial to run pilot programs.
Okay.
To see how incentives actually play out in the real world.
To see how they actually play out.
Things often look good on paper, but you don't know for sure until you test them out.
That makes sense. Sometimes the most logical sounding incentive can backfire in unpredictable ways.
Unpredictable ways.
Like that Cobra situation.
Exactly.
Like that Cobra situation.
The report highlights an example from the Producers Assistance Corporation.
Producers Assistance Corporation.
They were trying to create an incentive program to improve safety.
Okay, safety.
And initially offered gift cards.
Gift cards.
Through testing and gathering feedback.
Testing and feedback?
They discovered that reloadable gift cards were far more effective.
Reloadable gift cards.
People were more motivated by seeing their balance grow over time.
Seeing it grow?
Which wasn't something they anticipated.
It's amazing how even a small tweak to the design can make a huge difference in how people respond.
A huge difference.
It really shows that crafting effective incentives is both an art and a science.
Art and science.
You need to understand the psychology involved.
The psychology.
Anticipate potential pitfalls.
Potential pitfalls.
And be willing to adapt based on real-world results.
The world results.
It sounds like the key is to approach it with flexibility.
Flexibility.
And a willingness to learn as you go.
Exactly. And the learning never really stops.
Never really stops.
There's always something new to discover.
About
how incentives shape our choices, our behaviors, and ultimately our world.
This conversation has definitely made me realize just how many incentives are at play in our lives. Every single day.
Every single day.
It's not just about work or major life decisions.
Right.
It's the little things, too.
It's true.
The little things.
It's about your morning routine.
Okay.
Why do you choose that particular coffee?
That particular coffee.
Is it the taste, the convenience, the loyalty points you're racking up?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's the feeling of accomplishment you get from checking off that first task of the day?
Wow, you're right. I've never thought about my coffee habit through the lens of incentives.
Through that lens.
But it makes total sense.
Total sense.
It's a combination of rewards.
The
taste, the caffeine boost, maybe even the social interaction I get at the coffee shop.
And all of those factors. Contribute to making that choice day after day.
Day after day.
It's the same with things like exercise. Saving money, or even just dragging yourself out of bed in the morning.
Dragging yourself out of bed.
There's always some kind of incentive pulling the string. Whether we're conscious of it or not.
It's like we're wired to respond to these systems of rewards and punishment.
Rewards and punishments.
Even in the most mundane parts of our lives.
Even in those mundane parts.
But if we understand how these mechanisms work.
Right.
We can use them to our advantage.
Absolutely, to our advantage.
Instead of feeling controlled by these hidden forces.
Controlled by them.
We can learn to identify them and make more intentional choices. It's about designing our own system of incentives. To achieve our goals. That's such an empowering way to think about it.
Empowering.
So let's say I want to develop a new habit, like writing every day.
Okay, writing every day.
How can I use this knowledge about incentives to make that happen?
Well, the first step is figuring out what truly motivates you.
What motivates me?
What are the rewards that would make writing feel less like a chore?
Less like a chore?
And more like something you genuinely enjoy.
Let me think. I could reward myself with a nice cup of coffee or a walk outside after writing for 30 minutes.
Okay.
Or maybe I could join a writing group to get feedback and encouragement from other writers.
Those are great ideas.
Those are things I find motivating.
You're tapping into those non-monetary and emotional incentives we talked about earlier.
Tapping right in.
And you could even add in some social pressure. By publicly announcing your writing goal to friends or family.
Publicly announcing it.
Knowing they're aware of your goal might make you more likely to stick with it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to let them down.
That's brilliant. I'm definitely going to try that. But what about those days when I just can't muster up the motivation?
Yeah.
What happens when I hit a wall and writing feels like pulling teeth?
That's when understanding loss aversion can come in handy.
Loss aversion.
You could create a penalty for yourself if you skip a writing session.
Interesting. So something like donating money to a cause I don't support if I miss a day of writing?
Exactly.
That would definitely light a fire under me.
That fear of losing something you value can be a powerful motivator to stay on track.
To stay on track.
But remember, it's not about being perfect.
Not about being perfect.
It's about recognizing that we all respond to incentives differently.
Differently.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
It's all about experimentation and finding what truly resonates with you.
That's such a valuable point.
A valuable point.
It's not one size fits all.
One size fits all.
It's about personalizing your approach.
And it's not limited to personal goals either.
Not limited.
This knowledge about incentives can also be applied to relationships.
Okay.
Parenting, even tackling larger societal challenges.
Wow, I hadn't thought about it that way. How would you apply this to something like parenting?
Instead of constantly nagging your kids to clean their room.
Nagging the kids.
What if you created a system of rewards and consequences that encourage them to do it on their own?
So rather than relying on threats and punishments, you're shifting to positive reinforcement and creating a system that motivates good behavior.
Exactly.
Creating that system.
It's about making it more appealing for them to do the right thing.
More appealing.
And these same principles can be applied to address larger issues like climate change or public health initiatives.
It makes you think, instead of using fear tactics or guilt trips to try to change people's behavior.
Fear tactics, guilt trips.
What if we created incentives that made those choices more appealing and rewarding?
Precisely.
Appealing and rewarding.
It's about understanding what drives people. And designing systems that nudge them towards positive actions.
This conversation has been a real eye-opener.
An eye-opener.
I'm starting to see the world in a whole new light.
A whole new light.
It's like we're all playing this giant game of incentives.
This giant game.
And now I finally understand the rules.
That's the power of knowledge.
The power of knowledge.
It allows us to make more informed choices, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
It really is like a giant game.
A giant game, right?
And now that we're aware of the rules.
Now we know the rules.
We can start playing it more strategically.
More strategically.
This whole conversation has reminded me of that saying.
Oh, yeah.
Never underestimate the power of incentives.
The power of incentives.
They really are everywhere once you start noticing them.
They really are everywhere. You're right.
Everywhere.
And precisely why it's such an important topic to explore.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about individual goals, business strategies, or global challenges,
right.
Understanding incentives is key to creating positive change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive.
Wrap it up.
What's the one big takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that incentives are powerful tools.
Powerful tools.
But they aren't a guaranteed fix.
Not a guaranteed fix.
They need to be designed carefully, implemented thoughtfully, and constantly evaluated to ensure they're actually achieving the desired outcome.
The desired outcome.
It's an ongoing process.
It's not just about the incentives themselves.
Right.
It's about aligning them with the values and goals they're intended to support.
Aligning them with value.
We saw what happened with that CODRA situation.
Oh, the CODRA.
Misaligned incentives can lead to a real mess.
A real mess.
Exactly.
It's about creating a system. That is both effective and ethical.
Effective and ethical.
One that motivates people to do the right things. For the right reasons.
Well said. This deep dive has been fascinating. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how incentives shape our world.
A new understanding.
I'm going to be looking at everything through a new lens now.
A new lens?
Through a new lens.
That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Hopefully our listeners will too.
I hope so.
The more we understand about the power of incentives, the better equipped we'll be to create a world where they work for us, not against us.
That's what we want. And on that note,
we'll
leave you with one final thought-provoking question to consider.
A final question.
Think back to the Producers Assistance Corporation.
Producers Assistance Corporation.
And how they tweaked their safety incentive program.
They tweaked it.
They made a small change.
A small change.
From gift cards.
To
reloadable gift cards. And saw a huge increase in participation.
Huge increase.
What seemingly small tweaks could you make?
To
the incentive systems in your own life?
For your own system.
It could be anything from adjusting your reward system for personal goals to advocating for changes within your organization.
It could be anything.
Sometimes those small adjustments can make all the difference.
All the difference.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
And the fun.
Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.